Hi, this is Misha, and last year, September, we brought you a video on the Legion USA Russian RPK. A little shooting video. We did it during the Eclipse Day shoot. And now in 2018, I have a couple more to show you here and talk about. On the table, we have one of their, actually probably one of the last ones they'll build. They're essentially out of parts kits now to build these with. This is a standard RPK. This one is dated 1961. So it's going to have some early RPK features. Pretty unique. And behind it here, we have a 1971 RPKS side folder with the solid body side folding stock we'll talk about. These are actually a very limited production item from Legion. So what has Legion done? Well, in my hands here, or on the table, these things are heavy, I don't want to hold them. We have the 1961. This is serial matching. They have taken an original Russian RPK kit, combined it with a Nodak NDS7, which is a proper RPK receiver, 1.5 millimeter, bulge for the front trunnion. And unfortunately, I've had to build it on a Green Mountain barrel. Now, I'm not saying Green Mountains are bad, but they are US made. The good news is it is at least chrome lined, chamber and bore. I would prefer a cold hammer forged barrel, but the simple fact is, if any of you who bought the Romanian PM64 kits from Arms of America found out, 23¼ inch heavy RPK barrels are in very short supply. There are not very many original Romanians. Some people say that the Bulgarian ones from K-Bar will work with Russian and Romanian kits. Other people say that the K-Bar will not work. I don't know. Those are really the only options, and I think even K-Bar is now sold out. But those are really the only way to get original barrels. So they did their best. Like I said, at least they did do the Green Mountain with the chrome lining, which is better than not. And all the other parts are Russian. Actually in very nice shape too. These are very smooth guns. Legion USA is staffed by Russian workers. These guys were actually granted entrance into the U.S. on a work visa for skilled labor for being gunsmiths. They were once employees of either the Molot factory or the Izhevsk, today Izhmash factory. So even though this is built in the U.S., you can at least say it is actually built by honest-to-God Russians who worked in that industry. Now we combine this all. For 2018, they've tried to improve their finish a little bit. It's still kind of a Cerakote type. I know some people would rather have the Russian style paint, but they have tried to darken the Cerakote. Some parts, like the safety, often have the original finish because why not? But obviously things like the receiver and barrel have to be finished in something. So they try to keep as much of the original finish as possible. Gas tube safety often. Sight sometimes. So they're trying their best to make it as close as possible. I will point out one thing on finishes. Russia used different finishes over the years. So obviously a finish used in 1961 would not be the same exact finish used in 2001 at Molot. And of course, an original factory finish is going to be different than a refurbishment finish. From, Russia like to refurb all their guns. So just pointing that out, that not all finishes are equal. I think as long as it's a nice dark finish, it'll do. It's definitely better than a light gray Park phosphate. Well, it's me, so I can't resist talking a little bit about history. We have an older video from about a year ago on the RPK history, so this is a little redundant, so forgive me for that. The RPK really dates back to around 1955. At this time in Russia, they were thinking about getting rid of the RPD, which was their 7.62-39 belt-fed light machine gun. It had a fixed barrel. It had a clubfoot stock. It had a milled receiver. And while it was a well-made gun, really 7.62-39 is pretty weak for a belt fed. So what they would experience, they would have some problems if the belts weren't exactly in good repair, or if it got dirty or gummed up, or just, fouled from excessive shooting. And of course it was more expensive to produce. Now that in 1955 they were making the AK Type 3, which was also on a milled receiver. But they wanted to go back to a stamped receiver, which dates to the original AK Type 1. They worked on this throughout the 50s, and in 1959 this led to the AKM, which is basically an updated stamped receiver. Well, to go along with this, they wanted a light machine gun, and they wanted to be as parts compatible with the AKM as was practical. So a team led by Mikhail Kalashnikov developed the RPK, or Kalashnikov handheld machine gun, Kalashnikov light machine gun. And this was actually, the work was done at the Izhevsk factory as well. Really, it seems like this took a bit of a backseat to the AKM, which is logical, although they did work on them concurrently in 1959. In 1960, after the adoption of the AKM and as it was going into full-scale production, Izhevsk would transfer the production line over to the nearby Molot factory, at least what we know today as Molot. They did this because Izhevsk just had a lot going on. They were working on the Makarov at the time, they had other machine guns, they had other projects, and of course they were just ramping up for the AKM. Molot in turn had been established in the 40s during the Great Patriotic War, World War II, and it was tasked with producing the PPSH-41 submachine gun, and it got into making heavy machine guns as well as cannons, so it had experience making more squad level weapons. It was a good fit, plus it was near to Izhevsk, so they could help out setting up and problem shooting. So it got transferred over in 1960, they tweaked the design, and in 1961 it went into full production, hence why this is really a first-year production gun, at least standard production. Just to go a little bit forward before we go back, this was, went into production in 61 and was accepted by the Red Army, the Soviet military in 61, but it doesn't seem like it was actually fielded in large numbers, or at least in any numbers to speak of, until around 1964, which makes sense. They took time to pull the RPDs out of the field and replace them with the RPK. And there are accounts of this being seen during the May Day parade of 1966. So by 66 it was becoming quite a common sight in the Soviet Union. This is quite parts compatible with the AKM. Most notably, it takes the same magazine, has the same magwell. The bolt parts are the same, the trigger group is the same. We have a longer, heavier barrel, of course. We have a fixed folding bipod. It's actually quite lightweight because it's stamped steel. This barrel is fixed, it's pinned into the receiver just as on the RPD. Well, I should say the RPD was fixed, it was actually screwed into the receiver. This is pinned, so a little faster and easier. We are threaded 14 millimeter, and these usually had a muzzle nut on there, but that was there for a muzzle like blank fire device if we needed it. Typical AK style adjustable front post. The rear sight is elevation adjustable, as on an AKM. It's also windage adjustable here. Most of you know this stuff, I know. The lower handguard is heavy for the heavy barrel. We have a bulged trunnion. This is to give strength. It's also to let the heavier barrel lock in. And because of the trunnion being fatter, the receiver also has to be fatter. Whereas the AKM had a 1.0 millimeter receiver, the RPK has a 1.5 millimeter receiver. And moving back, we kind of basically stole the buttstock off the RPD. Now these aren't interchangeable, but the paddle shape was taken from the RPD. And this was done really to let soldiers fire in a prone or fixed position using it like this, getting further behind the gun. So that was the idea. It was quite a popular stock. Now, since this is a first-year production gun, it has a few interesting differences. One that you'll most note is the ribbed top cover. This is serial matched to the gun, so it's original. And it seems like for the first few years, this is what they would use before going to the smooth and heavier top cover that we're more familiar with. Also, we have a non-lightning cut bolt carrier here. Now, the bolt itself still seems to have lightning cuts, but the carrier does not. Interestingly, you'll see this on 1961 production AKMs as well. So it seems like the lightning cuts came in a little bit later. And you'll notice it has a wood pistol grip. I've tried to check and see. It seems like they used wood grips quite early on for a while, until at least 1967, 1968. So the first, half decade or more production, we would have wood pistol grips. Laminate wood with a metal ferrule on top. And those are really the major differences with these early guns. This has a Russian 75 round top loading drum mag in it. That's what they used. They didn't do the back loading. That was a Chinese invention. You just put a cartridge in, press, cartridge. Personally, I like this style a little better. It's a little faster to load for me personally. Maybe it's a sight thing, I don't know. It is a heavier drum. The metal is thicker. It just feels a little solid, more solid. And it is a little more compact than the back loading. So personally, I am a fan of the top loading drums. I do have a back loading, but I don't know. I just kind of like the top loading. But, loading, kind of winding up the back loading is cool, I suppose. Installing this when you're at a weird angle is, there we go. A table is not the easiest thing. There we go. And of course we have the Russian sling with the shoulder pad on it that I typically show. This is the standard sling. I'll flip it back around one more time for you. With just the single hook, as you see, and the pad. This would be used quite early on and is basically just your standard Russian sling. So as I said, this was the last production batch that Legion did in February of 2018. They were down to about 20 some odd kits, and I believe they built them all up. They might find enough parts to make one or two more in the back, but who knows if they'll be matching complete kits or just kind of thrown together. But this was essentially their last run, unless they can get another set of kits in. With Russian sanctions and a lot of scrutiny with parts coming over from Russia, who really knows? The retail price on these is not cheap. They are about $2,000 now. They were about 15, 16 before the sanctions. And that's just because of the limited parts. And even things like the Nodak receiver are getting a little pricier and harder to get these days. But if you check on Gunbroker and just find a Russian RPK kit, people are asking over $2,000 for just the kits without barrel or receiver. So Russian stuff in general has just gone up, unfortunately, which is bad for me because I really like the Russian stuff. But yeah, this is a first-year production Legion USA Molot RPK. Built with as many original Russian parts as is possible. Oh, one other thing, sorry, I forgot to mention. The dimpled receiver is actually correct. The 1960s era RPKs would have the dimples. They would delete them later in the 70s. Going to the slab side look, they decided they weren't necessary. But early on, we would have dimples. So that is also a feature of an earlier RPK. Next up, we have the RPKS side folder. Now this has the same basic build story as the fixed stock. They're building from matching kits. RPK barrel, chrome lined from Green Mountain. Pretty much all the same in the front. The differences are in the back here. This was the version introduced for paratroopers and other people needing a more compact light machine gun. I'm not sure how many people need that, but I'm going to set this off, guys, because it likes to monopod. But yeah, we have this folding stock. As you see, it's solid wood, very similar style. The release is here in the back. Any of you who own a modern VEPR will be familiar with that part that has the folder. There you go. And now we have basically the same as a fixed stock. Now this is a 1971, so relatively late in production. They would make these for a few more years before switching over to the RPK 74 and RPKS 74. And this will have later features. It has the smooth, heavy top cover. It has the bakelite pistol grip. I'm not sure on the dimpled receiver, honestly. Since the NDS7 is a dimpled thing, I'm not sure. I couldn't find a cutoff date when they would take the dimples away. I know by the mid-70s they were gone. They still may be correct for a 71. It's kind of difficult to say, but you know, obviously we're using the same receiver, which is interesting because in the rear here, essentially Legion USA had to modify an NDS receiver, and that's not easy. We had to recut the back. We had to put in this hinge. We had to put this hole in the side. And of course a different rivet pattern for the folding trunnion. Now, these would be, as I said, used by airborne. They seem like they were adopted a little later than the fixed stock, probably mid-60s. And these were very much still in use through the Afghan War. That's why I have the later style double hook sling on this one. Here. And the stock is quite interesting because we're still actually using two tangs. There's a top tang with one screw and a bottom tang with two screws holding it on. It is a solid body wood stock. It does have a storage compartment for a cleaning kit. But one interesting thing, unlike newer RPK designs, this on the side here is only the latch. It doesn't actually release the stock. See? Instead, you actually use the hole on the side. I'm going to try to fold it. Since these are new, they tend to be very stiff. So if I don't get it, guys, sorry. Especially on a table where I don't have good leverage. Okay, I think I got it there. But yeah, these the idea is a bullet tip is to be used. Now, when I stand up, it's not going to do it, is it? There we go. Like that. You would use a bullet tip to fold it, and it would lock to the side. And I'm sure the idea was for folding the stock, they did not want it happening during combat. After all, this was meant to be a machine gun. But for unfolding, say from a drop case, they wanted it to be quite easy, which is why you have a handy dandy lever in the back there. So the whole idea is quite neat to me. This stock locks up very tight. Basically, there's no play. And it's just a unique variant. Just a quick aside, folks. I was talking about the earlier style latch. This is my VEPR 1V. This has the more modern RPK 74M style latch. It has the hole in the side, but it's just an all auxiliary hole. You can still use a bullet tip to fold it, but you don't have to. You can actually use this latch over here. They've added serrations, so now you can just press it and it'll fold over like that. and then to release it, the same latch. So basically, instead of having a two-piece affair with two different latches, now everything's done with one latch that you can access 3 different ways, one on each side and then on the back. But that's the modern style of latch. It doesn't seem like these came into use until quite a bit later. It seems like most of the RPKSs, if not all of them, had that original style we just looked at. And I brought out a 40-round Russian bakelite mag for it, which these came into use around 1968. So it's quite appropriate for a 71 dated gun. Now, as I said, Legion did a run of RPKs last year, and they did about 20 more RPKs this year. But for these side folders, I've been talking with the guys over there. They've been planning to do these for a while, but they knew it was going to be a big build project. They were hoping to do a dozen. Then that number kind of got knocked down to 10 because they didn't have quite enough parts. In the end, it seems like they did about 6. So they only did about half a dozen of these because that's all they had, a complete kit with all the hardware in good working order for. As far as I know, they're the only outfit to commercially sell a Russian RPKS. All the other ones out there are custom builds. Even the kits are quite uncommon. And for this reason, you might guess it has quite a high price tag. These are retailing for about $2,500. And they're not even really out there because they only made 6 of them. So these are obviously all probably going to go to pretty hardcore collectors, I would imagine. But it's definitely a neat variant. Like I said, this one hadn't been fired yet, so it's still quite stiff, but I like that. The bolt's not quite as smooth. Needs a little oil, but it's nice. I do like that the bipod is tight. I hate rattly bipods on these things. It bugs me. Like I said, it has later features, smooth top cover, bakelite grip. You can see the lightning cut on the side of the carrier on this one. And there are a few other minor little differences. But really, Molot was pretty consistent with its quality. Well, that's about it. I just wanted to share that with you. I thought this one in particular was worth it, and I wanted to talk about the last run of the fixed stocks as well, since they've kind of improved the finish. Again, not cheap, but for the collector that has to have them all or that collects Russian, this is as good as we're really going to get. The only other import RPKs we've seen have been the Romanian AES-10B and the Molot VEPR 1V, which very few of those came in. There have not been many RPKs of any kind actually imported, so your best option has always been a kit build, especially if you want a Russian style. Well, if you have any questions or comments, we welcome them below. Please also check out some of our other videos on AKs. If you liked the video, please click like. And if you haven't already checked it out, you might want to look at our Patreon page. We try to give a few benefits and rewards. Well, you know, I know they're meager, but we do our best. And we really appreciate you tuning in. And please do so again soon for hopefully more interesting videos. We'll catch you then.